The day Samantha found out she was pregnant, the Georgia air felt heavier than usual, thick with judgment and a kind of heat that settled under your skin and stayed. She was 14, a quiet freshman with awkward limbs, oversized glasses, and a shrinking presence in hallways where girls wore confidence like perfume and boys played God with who they noticed. She wasn't one of them. Not loud. Not popular. Just the girl who sat in the third row with second-hand shoes and bruises she never explained. But all that background silence erupted when a test strip turned pink, and in one cruel afternoon, Samantha went from invisible to infamous. The news spread faster than wildfire. Whispers snuck behind her like shadows. Locker doors slammed harder when she walked past. Girls pointed with narrowed eyes, boys snickered, and teachers looked at her like a cautionary tale, not a child. She became a story no one wanted to hear, the dumb girl who got herself knocked up. They didn't know about the boy who promised love and left. Or the night it happened, under the old water tower when the stars felt safer than her own home. They didn't know she was just looking for someone to choose her for once. But none of that mattered. Because now she had a belly to prove it. When her mother found out, her voice went cold and metallic. "You've ruined your life," she said, before slapping her hard enough to leave a red halo on her cheek. Her father? He just walked away, silent, not even looking back. The house became a graveyard of slammed doors and withheld dinners. Samantha stopped speaking. At school, the stairs were knives. A boy threw a condom on her desk once during math. The teacher said nothing. Even her only friend, Rachel, started sitting further away during lunch. The nurse's office became her only refuge, a place where she could pretend the nausea was just a virus and not judgment growing inside her. When a school counselor finally called her in, she expected help. What she got was paperwork for a clinic in Atlanta, and a brochure that asked, "Are you too young to be a mother?" They all wanted her to disappear, her mistake erased, her shame buried. But Samantha couldn't. Not after she heard the heartbeat. Not after she saw that black and white flicker on the screen, the little pulse that proved she wasn't alone. "I don't care what they think," she whispered to the tech, who barely looked up from her chart. "I'm keeping him." She said him without knowing, because in her heart, it already felt like a son. And so began her exile. No baby shower, no nursery. Just a leaking trailer on the edge of town, donated by her grandmother who lived 2 states away and wanted no part of raising another bastard. Samantha dropped out of school, took a job cleaning motel bathrooms by day and washing dishes by night. Her back ached. Her feet swelled. The world stayed cruel. But somehow, she kept going. Every kick from her growing belly reminded her that there was something ahead, something pure untouched by all this ugliness. She named him before he was born, Jordan. Because it sounded strong. Clean. Like fresh water. Like rebirth. When her water broke, she was alone in the trailer. No one answered when she called. She bled. She screamed. And then she pushed, clutching a towel between her teeth, on a mattress stained with more than sweat. She thought she might die. But she didn't. Jordan came into the world crying, tiny fists clenched like he already knew what kind of world he was entering. Samantha held him to her chest, sobbing, from exhaustion, from relief, from terror, from love. She looked down at him and whispered, "I don't care if the whole town hates us. You're mine. And I'll never let them break you like they tried to break me." The trailer smelled like iron and milk and a beginning. Outside, rain started falling on the tin roof, soft and steady, drowning out the silence of the town that had already turned its back. Inside, a teenage girl held her baby close, shielding him not just from the cold, but from the lies they'd one day tell about who he could be. Like what you just saw. Or didn't see. Hit like, comment what you think really happened, and subscribe before it disappears. The sun filtered through a curtain of threadbare fabric in the cramped 2-room apartment where Eliza, now 15, stood barefoot on the cold linoleum floor, holding her son Micah, who was beginning to babble his first broken words. She was thinner now, her cheeks more hollow, dark circles under her green eyes deepening with every sleepless night. Her once fiery copper hair had dulled, always tied up in a messy knot, strands clinging to her sweat-slick forehead as she hustled between school, a waitressing job at Ray's Diner, and mothering an infant no one expected her to raise alone. Her body ached, her textbooks stained with spilled formula, but her resolve sharpened with every insult whispered behind her back, every stare from teachers who thought she was wasting their time. "You'll be nothing more than a welfare case," Ms. Loring had told her in sophomore history class, her voice as cold as the chalk dust that lingered in the air. And yet, each morning, Eliza fed Micah, packed her bag, and took 2 buses to a public high school where no one sat next to her at lunch. She ate in the janitor's closet, balancing her tray on a mop bucket. It was here, in this unlikely refuge, that she scribbled biology notes while her son cooed in a hand-me-down stroller. She began to dream again, not of popularity or dances or first kisses, but of white coats and stethoscopes, of healing people who dismissed her, of becoming someone no one expected her to be. Meanwhile, Micah grew. His curly hair darkened to a deep walnut brown, soft and wild, eyes as sharp as his mother's. At 3, he began counting in full sentences, surprising even Eliza, who juggled GED classes after dropping out due to bullying. "My mommy's gonna be a doctor," he told anyone who listened, his tiny voice loud with certainty. But the world still laughed. When Eliza walked Micah to preschool, older parents whispered, pointing at the child with a child. One afternoon, she overheard another mother say, "Poor thing. That boy doesn't stand a chance." That night, after putting Micah to bed, she cried in the kitchen, wiping her tears on a dish towel, whispering, "He will. He has to." Eliza scraped by with part-time jobs, cleaning motels, restocking shelves, and tutoring rich kids whose parents looked her up and down before handing her $20. But she kept pushing. She signed up for night school at the community college. Micah sat beside her in study lounges, building Lego towers as she studied anatomy and organic chemistry. Her classmates were confused by her presence. One whispered, "She's a mom? Here." A few snickered. But others, quietly, began to admire her grit. One professor, Dr. Caleb Strauss, a stern but fair neurologist with wire-rimmed glasses and a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard, noticed her performance. "You've got a fire in you," he said after class one evening, placing a hand on her essay marked with an A. "Don't let the world douse it." Eliza smiled weakly, nodding, her heart pounding as if someone had finally seen her as more than a statistic. She continued, slowly building a 4.0 GPA. Micah became her shadow, his intelligence blossoming in the flickering lights of dusty libraries and empty college corridors. By the time Eliza was 21, she had earned a pre-med degree, standing on a makeshift stage in a second-hand graduation gown that trailed behind her. Micah, now 7, clapped loudest in the crowd, his voice shrill with pride, "That's my mommy." But success didn't erase the sting of the past. Her hometown still looked at her like a stain. At the grocery store, a former classmate sneered, "Wow, you're still here?" At the gas station, an older man muttered, "You ruined your life too young." But Eliza only tightened her grip on Micah's hand, smiled, and walked forward. She applied to med schools, facing rejection after rejection, some subtly suggesting that her past made her a non-traditional and less competitive candidate. But she refused to break. Eventually, one acceptance came. Then 2. Then 3. She chose the one with the best pediatric surgery program, remembering how Micah once said, "I want to help kids too, just like you." The night before she left town, she took Micah to the overlook where she used to sit when pregnant, terrified of what the world would do to them. "We're not who they said we'd be," she whispered, hugging him close. "We never were." Micah looked up, his features now sharper, a mix of her and someone else she barely remembered, and whispered back, "We're going to change everything." And that night, with the wind howling through the trees, Eliza felt something close inside her finally break open, not in defeat, but in full bloom. At 22, Eliza Hayes no longer resembled the trembling teenager who had once sat in a janitor's closet feeding mashed bananas to her baby. Her posture had straightened, her voice carried weight, and her eyes, those wide ocean-blue eyes framed by chestnut curls she now wore pulled back in a neat low bun, held years beyond her age. But those eyes still carried something fragile, a wound not entirely healed. By now, Micah was 8, sharp, observant, and compassionate in ways that often unsettled adults. He was the kind of child who didn't just ask questions. He asked the ones grown-ups tried to avoid. One night, while Eliza studied at the kitchen table, surrounded by medical textbooks borrowed from a community library, Micah patted over in his pajamas and asked, "Why did people hate us when I was born?" She looked at him, stunned by the weight of his question. Instead of deflecting it, she leaned forward and told him the truth, not just about teenage motherhood, but about shame, judgment, and survival. It was the first time she'd said those words aloud. That moment changed something. Eliza's walls, the ones built from years of defensive silence, began to crumble. She started volunteering at a local women's shelter on weekends, offering tutoring to young single mothers. She became a symbol, though she never asked to be. One mother whispered to her during a GED session, "You make me believe I'm not trash." Eliza didn't know what to say. Her hands trembled under the table, but she simply smiled and squeezed the woman's hand. Meanwhile, Micah excelled in school, already obsessed with science documentaries and watching surgical videos far beyond his years. At 9, he dissected a frog for a school project and wrote a 2-page report on cardiac bypass. Eliza stared at his paper that night in quiet awe, realizing he wasn't just bright, he was brilliant. Still, life didn't stop throwing punches. When Eliza applied for a scholarship to a pre-med program at the state university, one of the panelists, a gray-haired woman with a thin smile, said during her interview, "Do you really think you can balance motherhood and medicine? Maybe try something more manageable." The shame in Eliza's stomach twisted like it used to in high school, but this time, she smiled softly and replied, "I've already balanced diapers and exams, poverty and honor rolls. If you think I can't handle your syllabus, you're underestimating the wrong woman." That clip went viral after someone in the back leaked the audio. For the first time, strangers were rooting for her. She got in. And she started med school that fall, carrying Micah with her like a silent badge of every sacrifice she'd ever made. Mornings began with rushed peanut butter sandwiches, Micah's tiny backpack swinging beside her as they both ran to their separate classes. Nights ended with her reading about neuroanatomy while Micah slept curled beside her, his little hand often still gripping hers. Every rotation, every lab, every moment of exhaustion brought back echoes of the voices that once said, "You ruined your life." But each time she closed her eyes, she saw Micah, his little crooked smile, his big questions, the way he'd once clapped alone in a crowd of silent parents. That memory fed her spirit like nothing else. Her professors began to notice her determination. One attending surgeon, Dr. Lemieux, a stern woman rarely impressed, stopped her in the hallway one evening and said, "You have something the others don't. I don't know what it is yet, but don't let anyone take it from you." Eliza nodded, but didn't say thank you. Instead, she walked to the hospital's child playroom where Micah was waiting and sat beside him. "Guess what?" she whispered. "We're going to be okay." And for once, she wasn't just surviving, she was truly living. The part of her that had once been defined by other people's mockery had transformed into something sacred. She had built a new story, brick by brick, not just for herself, but for the boy who was already beginning to shine brighter than she ever dared to hope.
If one line hit you hard, imagine what is next.
Like, comment your favorite moment, and subscribe so you never miss a heartbeat. The years between 16 and 22 were an unforgiving marathon for Ava, and every mile was laced with sacrifice. While her peers attended prom and gossiped about college dorms, she stood behind the counter at a 24-hour diner, wiping down booths with one hand and holding Isaiah's bottle in the other. Her days blurred into nights, and the world seemed to keep turning without her. But Isaiah, her anchor, her son, kept her going. By the time he was 6, he was already reading above his level, and Ava, who once dropped out in 9th grade, returned to finish high school through night classes. The moment she put on that scratchy adult education graduation gown, she looked at Isaiah sitting in the audience, swinging his legs, and whispered to herself, "We're going to rise, baby." Meanwhile, in their small judgmental town, people still whispered when Ava walked by. "That's the girl who ruined her life," they said. At her job in the diner, customers would leave her advice instead of tips. "Should have thought twice," one napkin read. But Ava hardened, not with bitterness, but with resilience. She knew she couldn't erase her past, so she started building a future brick by brick. She took a cleaning job at the local hospital. It was ironic, really, scrubbing the floors of operating rooms, watching people in white coats save lives while she silently dreamed her son into one of those coats someday. One night, after a long shift, she caught Isaiah pretending to perform surgery on his stuffed bear using cotton balls and paper clips. "You've got steady hands," she joked, exhausted. He looked up, serious. "I want to help people, Mom. Like the doctors do." That was all she needed to hear. She picked up a second job, started selling handmade crafts online, and squeezed every penny for Isaiah's education. But fate wasn't always kind. At 14, Isaiah was offered a scholarship interview at a prestigious prep school out of town, and they couldn't afford the bus ticket. Ava pawned her wedding ring, her mother's heirloom, to make it happen. He got in. The whispers turned into raised eyebrows. She thinks her bastard son will be somebody? But Ava didn't respond. She only worked harder. One morning, Isaiah came home bloodied and bruised. Some kids at his new school had mocked his background, his mother's age, called him poverty in scrubs. That night, Ava sat by his bed, tears slipping down her cheek, and told him, "Let their words be the scalpel you use to carve your path." Isaiah began to transform. He poured himself into science, joined every volunteer group, shadowed local physicians, and wrote essays about his journey growing up with a teenage mother. He won hearts, mentors, and awards. At 17, he was accepted into a pre-med summer program, one of only 4 nationwide to make the cut. That same year, he returned to the diner where Ava still worked night shifts and surprised her with a crisp white lab coat embroidered with the words, "Future Dr. Isaiah Carter." Ava wept against the counter, years of pain unraveling in that moment. And still, she didn't allow herself to believe it fully. Not yet. The world had mocked her once, but now it was her son's turn to speak back with actions, not words. In his eyes, she saw not only determination but a quiet storm, of brilliance, of compassion, of a promise kept. The town hadn't changed, but Isaiah was growing into the force that just might change it forever. Every second counts. Like if it hit. Comment if you caught the clue. Subscribe if you're ready for more. The day Isaiah turned 17, Ava barely made it home from her third shift in time to see the single candle flickering in a cupcake he had made himself. He didn't complain. He never did. Instead, he hugged her with the strength of a man who had grown too fast and said, "I'm going to change the world, starting with us." And she believed him. Not because she needed to, but because she saw it already happening. Every teacher who once eyed Isaiah like a ticking bomb now whispered in awe about his grades. Every person who used to call Ava names when she walked her baby in the freezing dawn was now asking her for shifts, favors, or advice. But the truth was, the scars hadn't faded. Ava still couldn't go near the high school auditorium without flinching. She still heard the echoes of that cold day at 14, when voices chanted slut like it was a sermon.
Isaiah knew.
He had read between the lines his whole life. That's why he carried her dreams like an oath, and that's why he sat in his room every night surrounded by anatomy textbooks he'd borrowed from the local library, a cardboard skeleton taped to the wall, and a poster of Ben Carson above his desk. Ava once offered to buy him a new phone. His was cracked and barely held a charge, but Isaiah had said, "This gets me to the knowledge.
You don't need anything else."
The day his college acceptance letter came, it was raining hard. Ava came in soaked, clutching a brown paper bag of groceries, and Isaiah met her at the door, envelope in hand, trembling. They opened it together. Full scholarship. Pre-med. Prestigious university. Ava dropped the bag.
Apple scattered across the floor.
She cried for the first time in years, and Isaiah just held her, letting the weight of it all press against his chest. That night, they made a feast out of boxed mac and cheese and danced barefoot in the kitchen like they had everything in the world. But not everyone celebrated. "That boy's too ambitious for someone with his background," Ava overheard at the market. "We'll see how long he lasts." And Isaiah, hearing it too, just clenched his jaw and whispered, "Watch me." At college, he was different. Not in identity, but in posture. He stood taller, listened harder, and worked like he was racing death itself. The other students came from money, from families with doctors, networks, legacy. Isaiah came with a single mother's heartbeat echoing in his every step. Ava sent him texts every night, "I'm proud of you.
Don't forget to eat."
He answered every time. But then came the burnout. The pressure. The exams that blurred together. Isaiah started sleeping less, eating less. Ava sensed it before he told her. She showed up on campus with a Tupperware of spaghetti and tears in her eyes. "Don't let them break you," she said, brushing his hair back like he was still 5. "You're not a mistake.
You're the medicine this world need." And Isaiah broke down in her arms, just a boy again.
That night, they sat on a bench under a flickering street lamp, and Isaiah asked, "Do you ever regret it? Having me so young?" Ava didn't hesitate.
"You saved me."
"They thought I gave up my life, but I found it in you." That answer never left him. It became the thread he pulled through every failure, every sleepless night, every rejection letter from internship programs that couldn't see past his story. Until one day, an attending surgeon gave him a chance, barely. A trial rotation in a trauma ward. Isaiah showed up before sunrise, left after dark, volunteered for every difficult task, learned every name, remembered every patient's face. One night, after 12 straight hours, he stayed to comfort a mother who had lost her child on the operating table. No cameras, no audience. Just him, her hand in his. The attending saw it. The staff started to whisper differently, about the kid with the eyes that carried both storm and steel. On the day he officially became a surgical resident, Ava showed up in a thrifted blue dress, holding the same paper bouquet Isaiah gave her when she graduated high school. "It's your turn," she said, voice breaking. At the ceremony, Isaiah was called to the stage. They listed his accolades, his perfect scores, his unmatched bedside manner. But when it was time to speak, he stepped up, glanced at the crowd, and said only this: "Everything I am was built by a girl they called a mistake." And he looked at Ava, tears streaming down her face, her hand on her chest like she was holding the heartbeat that had guided them both. The crowd rose in thunderous applause. Some remembered mocking her. Most never knew her. But now they saw. And in that moment, so did the world. If one line hit you hard, imagine what's next. Like, comment your favorite moment, and subscribe so you never miss a heartbeat. Isaiah stood at the podium, his white coat gleaming under the lights, but his mind wandered back through time like an open wound that had never quite closed. The applause had faded, and for a moment, he heard only the echo of a school hallway 14 years ago, where laughter had meant something cruel. Slut. Stupid girl. Another wasted life. The words had tattooed themselves across Ava's soul long before he ever had a voice to fight back for her. But now he did. And the silence in that room, filled with decorated surgeons and scholars, was deafening as he looked at the only person who had never doubted his worth. Ava sat in the front row, wearing the same second-hand maroon dress she'd bought for his middle school graduation. Her hands trembled around a bouquet of handmade paper roses, each one printed with notes Isaiah had left her over the years. "Thanks for the sandwich, love you, you're my whole world, Mom. One day, I'll buy you a house with windows bigger than our dreams." But the real bouquet wasn't in her hands. It bloomed in the life she had refused to give up on when the world told her she should. At 14, Ava had not been a woman. She'd been a trembling teenager in an ER gown, hearing that she was pregnant from a doctor who never met her eyes. Her father threw her out. Her mother locked the door when she came back. The boy, Isaiah's father, never even texted again. And yet she carried him. Through ridicule. Through labor so rough she bit through a towel to muffle her screams in a shared room at a public hospital. Through nights where she mixed water into the formula to make it last. Through years of night shifts, GED classes, and lectures from strangers who assumed she was Isaiah's sister, not his mother. Isaiah had watched it all. Every silent sacrifice Ava made etched itself into his bones like gospel. In high school, when a teacher casually asked if his mother was in the picture, he didn't just correct her, he delivered a monologue. Because Ava wasn't just in the picture. She was the whole frame. The whole gallery. When Isaiah applied for med school, he wrote his admissions essay not about overcoming poverty or discrimination, though he had faced both, but about a night when he was 10 and woke up vomiting blood. Ava carried him on her back 4 blocks to a clinic because the bus had stopped running and her phone was out of credit. She banged on the door like the building owed her something. It didn't, but she got him seen anyway. He remembered the look in her eyes when the nurse said, "We don't usually let minors bring in siblings," and Ava said, cold and clear, "I am his mother." That was the moment he knew, if she could fight through that, he could make it anywhere. Back in the auditorium, Isaiah inhaled, slow and shaky. "You know my name," he said to the crowd. "You know my degree. You know my achievements. But you don't know the reason I exist as I do. Let me introduce you to the girl they said would ruin her life at 14. Gasps rippled through the room as he turned to Ava. Every camera in the audience followed her as she stood up, confused and flushed. "This is my mother," Isaiah said, his voice catching. "Her name is Ava Grace Mitchell. She had me when she was 14. She scrubbed floors, changed bedsheets in hospitals, walked through neighborhoods with pepper spray, and put up with a lifetime of condescension so that I could stand here today. And now," he paused, his voice cracking, "now she's enrolling in nursing school, because she waited 18 years to start living for herself." The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for a speech. It was for a revolution that had started in a womb and ended on a stage. Ava wept into her hands, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe she'd lived long enough to hear her name spoken like that. The moment went viral within hours. Ava and Isaiah's story spread across every platform, every headline reading something like, "Teen Mom's Son Becomes Surgeon, Honors Her in Viral Speech." Strangers reached out with letters, many admitting they'd once been the ones who whispered, who stared, who judged. One woman, Isaiah's high school principal, wrote to Ava apologizing for telling her she should let the state help. Another was Isaiah's father's sister. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said she'd watched the video 5 times and cried each time. Ava didn't respond to all of them. She didn't need to. She was too busy helping Isaiah move into his new apartment, his first real home, with a rooftop garden, a washer-dryer, and framed photos of the two of them through the years. On the wall, he hung a blown-up version of a drawing he made when he was 5. It showed a stick-figure mom with a huge smile and a tiny boy holding her hand. Underneath, in block letters, it said, "My mom is a hero." And in all the ways that mattered, she always had been. The world saw her as a teenage statistic. A girl who'd ruined her future. But Isaiah saw the truth. He always had. Ava Mitchell had built a man with nothing but grit, love, and the unshakable belief that her child deserved the world, even if she never got it for herself. And in the end, that belief didn't just raise a surgeon. It resurrected her own story from shame into legend. Every second counts. Like if it hit. Comment if you caught the clue. Subscribe if you're ready for more.